A portfolio in a traditional sense wasn't really intuitive to me, since most of my work as a product marketing manager was a mix of execution and strategy, but heavier on a strategy and on the back end and creating processes. I didn't necessarily own a ton of assets myself. And my tenure at these companies as well has been really short. So, drawing dotted lines to long-term impact was already tough for building my resume, but now I also had to do it through a portfolio, showing exactly what I was able to put out despite my short tenure. It took a month to get here, and financially it's rough, but I still have to make that investment in myself.
Shawn, what's going on?
Hanging in there, man. It's been tough, but ready to get into the weekend. How are you?
Yeah, likewise. Excited to unpack some of the stuff. It's a Friday. It's sun's out. In Chicago, I think we get one more week of like a heat wave. So I'm excited about that. And then it's, just got to make the most of it. Yeah, super excited to talk to you. But love to just start with, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, just broadly, the person behind the product marketer?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me, Sid. I really appreciate you, inviting me to be a guest. I'm Shawn. I'm originally from Spring Valley, New York. I went to undergrad in the Bay Area. I moved back to New York for 6 years to work in tech before moving to Philly for my MBA. And now I currently live in the DC metro area with my partner. I love to travel. I love to read. I love to watch trash TV. The gym has recently become a big part of my life outside of work too. And I'm also the de facto head chef in my house and, love to cook and experiment with new recipes. If you look in like my Instagram folders, like I have a billion things saved to like cook, but that's just collecting dust at the moment. So I need to get back on top of that. But yeah, that's me.
Nice. I was just going to say, I have the same thing, but it's just collecting dust. Probably have made like 1/100th of the meals, maybe one or two if I'm lucky. So is there any like go-to you have for food?
Well, my family's from the South, so I do a lot of soul food. I love all the fried things. I love all the cheesy things. I say also, I think adjacent to that, a lot of people don't realize that maybe Italian would be a good cousin to soul food. And I feel like people who cook would probably make that dotted line connection. But I know it's not intuitive, but I also love to cook Italian.
Solid picks. Once I have a good recipe, I will share it with you, and then I'll be brave enough to share it on a podcast as well.
Dude, make sure it looks good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I also love to ask, and let's just change it to habit. Is there a non-marketing skill, of course, there's cooking or habit that's made you better at product marketing at your job?
Yeah. I mean, aside from cooking, I think honestly, like a habit that I have is enabling subtitles on TV shows. It could be anything. I think absorbing messaging through different senses has really made me more in tune with content and just understanding perspective. Of course, nothing really replaces tone of voice or, those slight inflections coming from folks on TV or customers I'm speaking to during, user interviews. But something I think about often is like, written text helps me capture nuances and really understanding, things that sometimes gets lost when you're simply considering the emotional variables embedded in vocal output. My husband thinks I'm an old man because of it. But it's definitely just helped me think more holistically about products or customer profiles.
That's super interesting. And it explains why I always need the captions on as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really funny. Okay. I like that. So yeah, let's talk more about product marketing. Can you tell me a little bit more about your career, your journey? I always say everyone has like a stumbled into product marketing moment. So what was that for you?
Yeah, same story. I actually pivoted from HR into product marketing after business school. And I initially wanted to go into brand management, but after I wrapped up my MBA internship with the CPG, I realized that I wanted to stay closer to tech. And I kind of fell into product marketing while on the job search during my second year. I thought the title, product and marketing, felt close enough to my interests at that point. And the rest is history. Since then, I've been a solo PMM at three growth stage startups across e-commerce, insurtech, and SaaS, and payments.
Very cool. So you've spanned a lot of different industries. What was that like? How did you kind of like break into a lot of different spaces, I guess?
Yeah. So I started off my career in PM product marketing at Zola, actually. So if you don't not familiar with Zola, they help folks get married. It's an e-commerce space that has like a registry, website, vendor marketplace. They sell invitations as well. And my first foray into that was, again, just like looking up opportunities that looked like it was going to be a good fit for me post MBA. Getting actually into the role itself was cool. Like I realized there was a whole backside to the wedding planning space. And given that I had recently been engaged, like I really tried to find that personal connection to the work as my first role out of business school, just to, really give me some inertia in terms of exploring, what customer profiles Zola was capturing and how to best serve them. And I think that's just been a through line over my career, is just like really making sure that I am centering the customer at all times through, my work. I think that through line has just really made product marketing interesting to me because, there's not a lot of roles where, marketing folks are speaking directly to customers to pull in those really cool insights that might be a game changer in terms of helping that customer segment out with a really niche problem they might have. So yeah, that's been a great through line for me in terms of just like things that I look for in terms of opportunities for other product marketing roles that I'm looking for, is like how close to the customer I'm able to get.
I really like that. And like, I guess maybe it's a little too stereotypical for the HR background, but that's got to help a lot, right? With
Mhm.
being able
Yeah.
to listen and understand, how people think and like, what, just really, yeah, just listen. Um, that's, that's super cool. If you could, I mean, I think you have a very interesting kind of career path and trajectory. Like, if you could go back and like whisper something to the younger version of yourself, yeah, what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah. I'd say the first thing is like nothing is linear. What I mean by that is, you know, you might work really hard on something and think that hard work is going to get you somewhere. And traditionally, the idea of working hard to get to the next thing is lauded and applauded, but it's not always going to materialize into, something that is really going to take you to the next level. I think me kind of burying my head in the sand a lot, especially earlier on in my product marketing days, just to like overproduce and, try to exceed expectations. It in some ways held me back because I was nervous about, going after an insight that may have, caused the wrong or led to the wrong output. And I think having that perspective of like, just going from point A to point B, and that just consistently being a through line for how you progress within a company is not going to allow you to see the forest for the trees. And sometimes you need to zigzag your way to the end product. And I'd say like the second thing would just be record everything, save everything. I think oftentimes, I've been in situations where it was contentious with different folks, not personally, but when it came down to specifics around like product value props or uh, something that was said in a cross-functional meeting. I think being able to record everything, synthesize things, and spit it back to other folks really builds that credibility that a product marketing manager needs, especially as they're navigating, tricky cross-functional spaces.
Yeah, I'm glad you said record everything because sometimes My memory doesn't serve me the way I need it to. So it's like great to be, yeah, usually great to, and like, yeah, in some ways you do have to be great at taking notes and like being able to document important decisions and stuff like that. So I like that. Very, very different answers so far that I had not heard. So I love to see that. Um, okay. So that takes us up to now. What are you up to these days?
Yeah. I am deep in interviews for new product marketing opportunities. So, I graduated with my MBA in 2022. And since then, the market volatility within the tech space specifically has been really rough. So for context, by the time I was wrapping up school, my partner and I got engaged. My partner is a longtime federal employee. So that meant that I needed to stay put in the Washington, D.C. metro area. That also meant that I needed to lean in on remote opportunities. So, if anyone knows DC, you know that the corporate presence here is sparse, and especially for traditional business roles that don't touch policy. So, given the growing RTO trend among, the bigger tech companies, solid opportunities are just getting harder and harder to come by. And I've been laid off 3 times, back to back, and twice this year alone. And I was told not through any fault of my own, but by nature of the startups I've been cornered into considering, most of the time with much lower pay than peers in bigger hubs and doing a lot more work. So, that's meant standing up the function on my own without a dedicated product marketing team or product marketing lead or manager to get mentorship and direction from, all while executing, building credibility with folks who have, for the most part, never worked with PMMs before and delivering value quickly. So it's been a pattern of, coming into organizations already at a huge disadvantage as a product marketing manager. And, add to that the unclear expectations and, no real top-down investment in the function from exec. It's been a bit traumatizing, honestly. I spent 6.5 years at my job before I went to business school. I was also a recruiter in my past life. I know what it looks like on, resumes when you see candidates being job hoppy. And I would hope that, hiring managers have a sense of like what's going on in the market and bringing that insight as they're, looking at resumes. But, you can never be sure. I'd say like I love being a product marketing manager, but, I also need to survive, right? Like pay my mortgage, pay my student loans, et cetera, et cetera. So it's made me want to work weekends and nights, under the belief that if I can deliver value and go above and beyond whatever was expected of me in that moment, as I was alluding to a little bit earlier, that I'd have a little bit more security in my role, but that hasn't been the case. So that's what I'm up to these days, just trying to find my next opportunity.
Well, thank you for sharing, Shawn. I know it's tough to be transparent about this kind of stuff, and I really appreciate you like opening up. I have a feeling just from what I've seen around and the conversations I've had that you're very much not alone. And this topic resonates with a lot of people. And it's not like easy, right? Like we can glorify it or kind of make it seem like it's just, whatever, but like it's harder than it looks. So I'm curious, like in your process, what challenges have you faced in the search? You kind of mentioned some of them, the job hoppiness or like kind of potential biases a recruiter could have, but what are the challenges you're dealing with? And also like, how are you overcoming them? Right. Because you are getting interviews, you are making progress. Like, how are you going about that?
Yeah. So I got laid off in January of this year and found another opportunity in March. I was laid off 116 days later in July. And I'd say within that short amount of time, expectations of, PMMs on the job market have really morphed into untenably ridiculous baselines, in my opinion. For example, I learned that hiring managers were beginning to expect folks to have portfolios on hand. A portfolio in a traditional sense, wasn't really intuitive to me since most of my work as a product marketing manager was a mix of execution and strategy, but heavier on the strategy and on the back end and creating processes. I didn't necessarily own a ton of assets myself. and my tenure at these companies as well has been really short. So, drawing dotted lines to long-term impact was already tough for building my resume, but now I also had to do it through a portfolio showing exactly what I was able to, to put out despite my short tenure. So, when I was laid off, I spent a good month or so this summer just like building case studies and pulling in anything public facing that I touch and begging folks who were, still at these companies, who I had good relationships with to send me my work samples. So, although it's been challenging, I will say that over the last few months of building my portfolio, I've really reinvested in myself and my work ethic as a product worth marketing. So, all the hours, spent building for other people was really redirected into building for myself. And it was a really good exercise in keeping my skills sharp and exploring, new AI tools to help bring everything together. But I think that goes back to the moral of, I think being a PMM and being a good PMM these days is just building good relationships with folks internally as quickly as possible. Like none of those folks had to send me anything. Honestly, for the most part, once you're laid off, I think a lot of people experience this. It's pretty much like crickets from folks internally who've stayed behind. So I think it's a testament to the relationships I was able to build, and I'm grateful for that. It's just still, getting past that threshold of like, now I'm finally ready to seriously apply. Now that I have all these things, it took a month to get here, and financially, it's rough, but I still had to make that investment in myself.
That says a lot. And I really like what you just said about like becoming a product worth marketing, right? Because it is all about product market fit. And I think sometimes it becomes like, hey, let's just focus on spraying out more job applications and like promoting yourself. But sometimes it's also about building yourself up and like building the skills or the portfolio, whatever that might be. So I really like that, you have these two lenses. Also, just to clarify, you got laid off at these companies. They were already going through financial burdens. It's not like you got laid off based on merit. Just for anyone who might be hiring or having an open role, want to be very clear about that because I think that's important. Okay. So you mentioned, the importance of cross-functional relationships. What's like a skill that is kind of underrated in product marketing, the PMMs like, you might not have heard of or didn't realize was important until now?
Yeah, I think it's cliche, but I do think that it's single-handedly the best skill that you can bring to a product marketing role. It is building relationships. It's really important to one, having your finger on the pulse of things that are going on across the company, so that you're not starting from scratch when you need to pull data or you need to pull a couple of folks in to organize, a GTM, campaign or launch campaign. So like, it's just good having friends in high spaces is what I like to call it. And you do that. I think you build those relationships by really showing, what you're capable of through one, your skill set, how you approach problems, how you talk about solutions in relation to those problems, but also like showing up to folks, like let's say with growth, for example, if a growth manager has an issue that needs to be solved with like messaging, around a paid social retargeting plan, you having that relationship with the growth manager already gives you some insight into what has worked previously. Like I think a lot of product marketing managers sometimes forget that, we're not in the mix of all these different channels, and, different execution plans that come with those channels. I think being able to kind of just ping someone on the side who's on a growth team who you built a good relationship with, they're able to fill you in, a lot faster without necessarily starting from scratch. And two, they also like you probably. You've built credibility by showing interest in their role, and in their function. And you come with good intent to not only help yourself as a product marketing manager and help the business, but also help them as a person. And especially given like, oftentimes product marketing managers are the only ones on in their company. As a solo PMM myself, it is desire to build relationships. And, you know, those cross-functional folks are your team if you don't have a wider product marketing team, and you need to be super in tune with them in order to like get things going without necessarily pulling teeth or hurting cats.
I really like that. Like the idea of context. You can lean on those people, and basically you kind of have to. If not, you're kind of just shooting in the dark. Um, we actually had an episode recently with Hannah Pickering, who talked about like building relationships, building trust, and like how you earn that seat at the table. And I really like what you're saying is like part of that is like providing context, and then also receiving context or being in a place to receive context, whether that is just through the simplest stuff that when it comes to building a relationship, just like being likable, being someone that people want to talk to and share stuff. And then on top of that, caring as a human, not just as the product marketer, not just as the teammate. Um,
Exactly.
so I really like that. Um, okay. In your past roles, like how have you gone about doing that? I think you had the great example of the paid campaigns. Like what else, examples do you have?
Yeah. So oftentimes the single-handed, we like most important relationship you're going to have internally outside of, being on your product marketing or the marketing space is just with your product manager or product managers that you support. I think what has really helped for me, especially having navigated three different industries that were serving lots of different products across B2B and B2C, ICPs, it was important for me to, one, be open to the fact and admitting to the fact that, I don't know everything coming into this space. And chances are, the product manager has been doing this for a little while or maybe not, but they might have a little bit more insight into, user behavior, customer behavior. So when coming into a new space, a new company, a new industry, it's maybe a really niche product, really leveraging like gaps in knowledge about that space as a way to de-risk, um, you know, cross-functional, um, one collaboration, or it could be de-risking a launch, or it could just be troubleshooting specific process gaps along the way. I think with PMs, like for example, I worked with a really complicated, highly technical SaaS product that was within the insurance space. I had recently come from weddings, right? So my knowledge was like zero, and I had a launch that I had to execute within 3 months, and it was a B2B launch. So I came into the situation with that product manager just with humility, like, hey, there's a lot I don't understand. I need to ramp up fast. But I've been able to take the initiative and do some of the little bit of research that I was able to do, whether that was, reviewing sales calls, or, looking at, earnings calls from carriers, from insurance carriers that we supported. So I've gotten some context. I've drawn some assumptions. During my first meeting with the product manager, I want to bounce some of those assumptions off of that person to get a sense of like, hey, am I on the right track when it comes to thinking about this in relation to the product? And I think coming to meetings, despite not having a lot of, context or knowledge about the business, with, things that you can kind of throw at the wall and see what sticks with the product manager specifically, I think really helps build credibility because it shows, one, initiative, and two, it just shows like interest in wanting to work with this PM as a thought partner and as a, instead of like an order taker. You're able to interrogate some of those nuances that a product manager might have, in terms of understanding the space, understanding a specific customer, and then kind of like use those gaps on your end to begin like iterating on any new messaging concepts that might come out of that. And you're really just involving folks like right at the beginning of your relationship, when it comes to understanding the product, understanding channel strategies, understanding goals that they might have. So yeah, I always talk about like the willingness to de-risk launches or de-risk processes by just being super candid with what you don't know. So that way you're throwing stuff back at them to see if like, am I on the right track? And sometimes that might get them thinking differently too. So that builds credibility. It's just really important to show interest in what they're doing and come in with your own assumptions.
I really like that. At the end of the day, we're all looking for a sparring partner, right? Let's not it's not AI sometimes. So I think it's nice to have exactly what you're saying. Like that it shows how you think and how you like come up with stuff. And usually, right, in any conversation, as humans, the question or the statement will come up that like, hey, I never really thought of it that way. That's interesting. Like maybe we should go explore that. So yeah, especially in early days, I think that's a great way to bring value and just like examine a lens that other people might not have considered. I think it's like that newcomer's kind of brain, right? Once you get whatever, like embedded into an industry or a persona, then you stop like thinking as a broad picture, you miss pieces of the puzzle. And this is a great way to do it. So I really like that.
Yeah.
I think, given your position, you also have the opportunity to like see what's out there and be like, oh, this is kind of like, incomplete BS or something that's just like, whatever, glorified on LinkedIn, but isn't really the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there something like that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot floating around LinkedIn. There's a lot of frameworks floating around that I think, don't really account for the serendipity and the randomness that comes with the job, realistically. You can have all the frameworks in the world for how to solve a problem, but the minute you get to, a space where everything is completely new and different, some of those principles need to go by the wayside until you're able to, figure out the lay of the land, in terms of people you're working with or the product or, the competitive landscape. It could be any of those things, but there's no like step one, customer insights, step two, coming up with messaging positioning. I think getting into those buckets, those rigid buckets can really, hold product marketing managers back. So, I think there's space for all of that. It's just when it comes to, actually executing in real life, it's good to kind of have those ideas in the back of your head, but then also making sure that you're approaching the problem with fresh eyes. I think in my experience, that has led me to sometimes reinventing the wheel multiple times, but every time I did so, the wheel was specifically adjusted to that space. And I think being able to acclimate to the environment around you is more important than, following these tested frameworks that might work in a traditional product marketing setting, but it doesn't really fill in the gaps when there's ambiguity around. I'd also say like there's not a ton of content from solo PMMs, right? Like I'm not that active on LinkedIn in terms of posting things. I save things a lot. I might like a couple of posts here and there, but I'm oftentimes seeing folks kind of post their successes with the team that they were on, the wider product marketing team that they were on, where they've had a lot of support. Or sometimes they're not mentioning the team, even though they have a team, but they're kind of championing all the, the good things that came out of it. I'd love to see more solo PMMs actually talk about like what it's like to build the plane while it's flying. It's a really unique experience, especially to folks who are solo PMMs at, growth stage startups, where there's not a lot of resources. And talking about like scrappiness and working in ambiguity, like there's a lot that can be said there. There's a lot of pain there, speaking from experience. But I think, really someone really articulating that in a way that's real and genuine and not just focusing on the highlight reel, I think can shed some light into what it's really like to be in some of these places.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, in terms of like, the solo PMM journey is very tricky. I don't think you can technically say I've actually ever been on it, so I don't want to speak to it too much. I've ran my own like startups and like come up with my own things, so I guess that's the closest thing. But
Yeah.
even then, solo PMM is different from a founder or something like that. So, um, yeah, that's super helpful. Shawn, this has been great. Would love to ask you a question I love to close out with, which is product marketing is blank. Can you fill in the blank?
Yeah, I'd say product marketing is evergreen. What I mean by evergreen is that it's the gift that I think keeps on giving with as much as you put into it, depending on what you want to get out of it. There's so many ways to lean into it. If you want to focus on specific skill sets that you want to, get more proficiency at, but it's a constant learning cycle. And if you really love learning, if you're a lifelong learner and you just genuinely have curiosity and interest in exploring these spaces, product marketing is for you.
I like that. It doesn't go out of style.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Shawn, how can people learn more about you and what you're up to?
Yeah. You can actually go to my website at shawndye.com. My portfolio's there. I also have a Calendly link there in case, folks want to talk one-on-one. Always happy to do that. I've been getting a lot of messages from folks who have been career switching as well. That, it's always great for me to be in a space to, share my own experiences, and hopefully that helps folks make, better decisions than I made earlier on in my career. So I'm always willing to chat, and also open to just friends, right? Like I live in DC, so there's not a lot of us here. So, if you're in the area, definitely reach out. I'd love to, grab coffee or drinks or whatever, just to continue building up, that community. I think is super important, especially for folks who are sometimes in these roles alone.
Yeah. And I'll just say the website, I remember checking it out myself. It is pretty impressive. It all goes back to what Shawn was saying about kind of, sharpening the sword and continuing to grow. So highly suggest you check it out and hit up Shawn. Shawn, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Sid. I appreciate it.
For everyone still tuned in, thanks so much for listening. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please help us spread the word to other product marketers. Thanks again, and have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are.